I'm not going to try to speak Spanish because I'm going to really massacre this beautiful language, and I would like to apologize for that, that I'm not able to speak Spanish. I'd like to thank Dr. Francisco and all the team for inviting me to speak today. And I'm very delighted to share some of the ideas and some of the work that we are trying to do back in Africa. As Dr. Francisco said, I've been working for the development of social work, education, and practice in Ethiopia, in Mauritania, in Comoros, in Cameroon, and now I'm working in Congo. And the thing is how to basically to relate to the overall international social work practice and theory, and also what's going on the ground. Um, I think, I mean, the slide and the title, I don't know if you could see the slide. Yes. Do we have the slide? I think the slide have been closed. The technician can put the slide back.
We don't see nothing now in the screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can see now?
Thank you.
Okay. The title of the talk or the lecture will be, as said earlier by Francisco, the consensus on principle and dissent in action, rethinking social work in Africa. Why this is not something new for me to work about or to discuss about consensus in principle and dissent in action, because this is a major preoccupation on everyday life. I just put here a little image of the the Andika symbol, Sankofa. Sankofa is the bird looking back, which means that to go back and take. It means, or it signifies that the importance of returning time and time again to bring back it to see what was happening before and how we're going to go in at the next phase. Uh, there is a saying in a very old proverb, Ethiopian proverb, as many of you may not know, I am from Ethiopian origin. And in Ethiopia, there is an old proverb saying that saying it once, something is okay. But if you say the same thing 3 times, that suggests that there is a problem which is not solved. And it's very interesting. This is because basically, um, and this may be to reflect to our, I mean, some colleagues, I mean, Peter Ergard was saying the first wisdom of sociology is there, these things are not always they seem. Things are not always what they seem. I mean that we have always to look beyond. That's why I'm saying that consensus in principle and dissent in action, because there are overall consensus on many things, but it seems that when we go to action, things become different. Working, I mean, the entire discussion will be on working toward the emergence of decolonized social work theory and practice in the profession that has been and still is an important area of concern for social work educators and practitioners. Since at least 2 decades, a global consensus seems to be reached on the imperative of decolonizing social work. One could thus relegate this issue as a past or an old story that we tell our children. Erase una vez. I think this is how you see. I mean, there is one time, upon a time, but unfortunately, however, we observe that these issues are reopened now and then as a new, in a different format, in a different place. Why then this issue are persistent? The first thing maybe to ask is, do we have a shared understanding on what's on the table? If the assumption of a common view or common understanding has been reached on decolonizing social work, why then the problem is persistent? Is decolonizing social work only a political stance or practical possibilities? Is social work in the African context is a copy of the Western model or local invention, reinvention? Should we go from practice to theorization or from theory to practice? I don't know if it's Hegel who said that theory explains reality, and if reality don't coincide, forget reality. Then now the question for us is, should we start theorizing practice, or should we really intend to go from practice from theory to practice? And in order to describe this, I'll maybe pose a concrete problem or concrete project as a possible avenue for discussion. This is what I call that Francisco said earlier, the project that I'm working with. These are the issues that I want to discuss with you. I don't know if the translation, am I speaking well, or do you understand what I'm trying to say? Okay. Okay. Then tracing tracing the debate is most probably one important area. Two major underlying thinking among many serves as the basis in social science and beyond, shaping this debate about colonialism and decolonialism. The tension of what is common and what's different. And the second is most probably power relation among and across societies. The proposition of Panikar, Sheikh Anta Diop, and recently Rawan Connell and his book, The Thousand Theories, attempts to locate and validate social sciences development, where some authors and politicians attempt to demonstrate that Africa is ahistoric. I don't know if you remember some years back the discourse of the French President Nicolas Sarkozy in Dakar saying that Africa don't have history. And this proposition of Panikar, Shekanta Diop, and others are trying to settle that Africa has, they should attempt not only that to show that Africa possesses a long and articulated history, but to some extent, it is at the base for social sciences and philosophy development, explaining, for example, the paternity of sociology to Ibn Khaldun, a Tunisian-born philosopher and historian, or demonstrating that the Clara Yaakov, the Ethiopian philosopher, preceded Descartes. Just for showcase, the extensive research of Sheikh Anta Diop focuses on demonstrating the contribution of Africans, and in particular, the contribution of South Africans to the world culture and civilization. You know, Edward Said, with his famous book, The Orientalism, addressed the relation of power in the context of colonialism. Closer to us, to our subject, social work thinkers such as Midley, Jim Ive, Dominelli, Ozeri Hawiti, Gray, Fook, Unix Young, Kreiser, Seopol that you have this yesterday, Razol and Harmsmith, Notombeko, to mention few, are engaged on the implicit and explicit debate on how and why social work education and practice in different places should be transformed and freed from coloniality. Social work academics and practitioners are trying hard, sometimes with success, to shaping the debate under different themes such as professional imperialism, anti-oppressive social work, indigenization of social work curricula and practice, culturally relevant social work education and practice, cross-cultural social work practice, decolonized social work education and practice. It can be observed that while all this theme and concern seems to be located with the same thinking, what is common and different, and or what are the power relation, the available proposition attempts to respond to specific questions raised in particular societies and sometimes on different communities within the same society. Sometimes all these issues relate to migration, intercultural approach, First Nation people around the issue of indigenization, minorities, or in general in the relation the southern countries with the West or with the North. This large area of discussion are hardly easy to focus and to create a holistic response on the perceived necessity of transformation of social work education and practice. All approach them to explain that colonialism domination has a major effect in imposing the culture, the economy, and the political of the colonizer onto or into the colonized. And this assertion, nothing new. This has been said for over a century. However, and interestingly, most writers seem to ignore or at least not pay enough attention for one reason or another, or do not insist on the fact that the colonized have always struggled against, resisted admirably to all colonial powers in the sphere of life. A priori, to our dismay, the collective recognition of the problem identified by all do not seem to adequately produce, beyond a repetitive political discourse and stance, very important and globally relevant transformative practice and theorization within the profession. Moreover, once we acknowledge the issue of domination dominated, then what's the next step? We can all agree that knowing the problem, naming the problem, is an important point of departure, but one is entitled to ask, then what? What's to be done? I'm not trying to be a Leninist, but this is the question. What's to be done then, once we know the problem? The kind of question may sound less sophisticated, less theoretical, and often relegated to only a pragmatic position. But I think that there is a need, at least in social work practice, to be relevant, to have clear and articulated proposition to go forward if we want to advance and not only to lament that situations are not good. Making the record straight. To start with, and very interestingly, the entire discourse on the origin of social work has not, to my view, been clearly challenged. Most of you will know these writings. The writing about the history of social work will systematically trace the profession to the earliest origin of social work dating back to the Middle Age, wherein church-based ministering to the poor, which evolved into philanthropic and social justice movement of the 19th century. Today, social workers are still connected to these originating tenets of compassion, fairness, and community. Or the social work profession grew from the three distinct strands: the social work policy of poverty relief that grew from the English poor law of the 17th century, the casework approach developed by the charity organization Society, the CSO, in Britain in the mid-19th century, and the notion of social and political action aimed at addressing social injustice that began with the settlement house movement. This is where, so when you look the history of social work, this is where social work is located. It's as if the countries in the South, or for that matter, the South may include countries that are today in the North, do not have in the past any practice, policy, and instrument supporting the poor and those in difficulty. It is as if they just discover what is social work with Western social work that is all about. It's as if something came from some place to another. It's as if all what I've said earlier, I mean, when you look the social work history, that the others don't have that. Outside the British or outside some of the countries, social work doesn't exist, or what's said here doesn't exist earlier. It's very interesting. And most probably Spanish social worker, I don't know, now Spain is in the north, but most probably for some time for some other countries, Spain was in the south, or Italy was in the south for some countries. And it's very interesting to see that most countries are not coated of having a source. I don't know if you remember the first document or the first picture I saw about the bird, saying that we have to go and look, because this is how you set something. If you say there is nothing behind, then that means that you discover everything. Then when we speak about colonization of social work, that means that we have also erased what was existing before. And this, even within the profession, we have not challenged enough this concept. The African, scholars, I don't know if you know Fred, he said there is a sense of schizophrenia running through this discussion, which I cannot avoid mentioning, difficult as it is for me. Virtually all sociological theory, all the major concepts come from outside the continent, while we are firmly rooted here and in our major intellectual and political preoccupation are located in our national and continental home. I feel this schizophrenia very deeply because I know that I am an embodiment of it. I think for social work, it will be the same thing for me. I mean, if everything comes from outside, while the problem that I am trying to deal every day is local, then there is a problem with what we call, a collective or global vision of social work. Attempting to go forward toward the renewed social work practice in African continent and maybe beyond require the acceptance to trace and recognize the existence of local knowledge and ways of doing. If we attribute at least social work practice as a purely imported model from abroad, limited space remains to acknowledge what we are observing on every day. The issue is not to find at all cost similarities or denial on what comes from the West, but to inquiry from practice what we are observing on the ground. To the exception of a very few countries such as South Africa, it should be said that social work practice, even when it is prescribed by the academic institution, has gained a very narrow applicability in the South and in the continent of African continent. On the ground, very few or any of the social work theories and practice imported from the West countries are implemented. Even where the desire to implement exists, and Francisco was saying earlier about the connectivity, it could be about the books, it could be about resources. The entire infrastructure, both social and organizational, would hardly permit it. And to be honest, each time this has been attempted, without any doubt, it has failed to produce any relevant engagement. The reality of social work practice that we observe in multiple settings in Africa is to some extent a reinvention, each time specific, each time different. Paradoxically, the issue at hand seems often how to struggle shaping the everyday political practice, the everyday local practice to equate with what is a social work in the book of social work and theories rather than rethink and re-theorize what is on hand. I'm not implying that there is no tentative or even willingness to reproduce the practice from the West in the African context. I'm just observing that they hardly take ground and adhere to the reality. Then all this is the preamble of what I have discussed earlier in order to show how we transform on everyday social work practice with what is possible and what is obvious on the ground. It's interesting to observe that an incredible level of social initiative, innovation, and transformation are being developed in different parts of Africa when it comes to social work intervention. It is most probably the time to analyze this innovation and initiative and learn what they offer in terms of possible generalization and articulation. Most often, this innovation attracts very limited interest from the academia for two main reasons. One, they do not fit with the existing literature of social work. And two, they remain relatively hidden and at the experimental level without much possibility to be scaled up. Meanwhile, we have been greatly surprised by the level of adherence of local social workers to this new innovative experiments. Then what we have done in our plan is basically we have been organized with 180 social workers in Congo to try to draw lessons, a shared diagnostic on what was happening for the last 3 decades, and then from that common shared diagnostic to try to shape new program of action. This is redesigning the entire social work organization, building collective capacity for change, working at all levels of social work administration, from ministerial level to the level of district, from the ministers to the basic social worker, connecting all level of social work administration. And this is maybe in line with the thematic of the conference of connecting or the digital divide, re-engaging community and developing social ties as a mode of action, political, economical, social, and cultural, bringing collective responsibility at the heart of the action, re-establishing a new school of social work based on this thought, and working on new national legislation for social work. The entire discussion is how to decolonize social work if the economy, if the mind, if the heart, if the culture, and if the other all elements are not decolonized. Then speaking about decolonizing social work can only operate if we are speaking about in a global situation. That's why that in a very narrow, limited, and not changing the world, but changing a specific area, we have engaged in this project. This is a major project that is funded by different donors. And we have 3 paths of the project. The first is reinforcing and building capacity within the entire community of social workers. 2, piloting a new way of working with community. And 3 is how to use new technology for a national social information system that social work could use. These are the 3 elements of the project that I'm going to present. First of all, in Congo, we used to have a school of social work, as many schools of social work built in Africa in the 50s and 60s. It has been closed 20 years back, and we have to reopen and to rebuild a new school of social work. But at the same time, this time, to rethinking really what is social work in Congolese context and what that means, what should be taught, what are the principles, what are the values, and so on and so on. Rethinking collectively the content of social work education and practice, rearranging the global organization of social work services, including rehabilitation of social work places, building, and so on, redesigning a new process and methodologies, training the entire workforce with the new design courses. This is, for example, what we have tried with colleagues to work to trace what would be the social work. We didn't try to bring the definition, international definition, or only the book definition of social work, but we really took more than 3-4 months to discuss with social workers, with communities, what it means social work for them, what they call Bomoto or Ubuntu or different terms. And we try to find, these are a drawing of one of social workers, to see what is the basis, what are the value behind in social work in this different context. We have even to name them differently. We have to use the local name, not to copy, but really to see what it means. That's why you will find many things for those colleagues. I'm sure many of you speak French. You could find some French words, but these are, the entire basis, what they try to find within the context. Then we start thinking social work, not only from what is imported from outside, but also what is within the community, what the community understood it is. These are, what you know, that Ubuntu, Bomoto, Kimutu, which is translated in terms of respect of the dignity. It is, how to care to the others, how to be, nice, under quotation, to others, and so on and so on, how to be fraternal to others, how to be protecting the others, and so on. All this value are existing within the community. And then we have to rehabilitate them, those values, in order to start to work with the community, because the community understands those words. But if you come saying that individual or casework or whatever, I mean, people don't understand because they don't have that connection. But they have their own word, they have their own way of organizing, their own way of being solidar, and so on and so on. That's redrawing, relearning together the entire principle. Then we have to pilot a new project to see, to change of what you call, many colleagues in this conference have been speaking on different program or cooperation, international cooperation program. Most of the program that we have evaluated or diagnosis, most of them were what we call the survival strategy. I mean, most of the project ambition is to keep the poor where they are, not because they want to keep them where they are, but the resource available is basically how those people could survive, not how these people could go out from poverty or eradicate poverty, but how we can go out from how we could survive without dying, how we could live still in the same situation. Then we say that we have to listen seriously to the energy, motivation, and vision of community. This was not the case before. As you know, most of the action is what we can do, and what we can do is limited what the establishment or what the institution could offer, not what the people want to do. Then often we don't listen seriously to the energy or to the motivation or to the vision of community. We will tell them, this is what you can do. These are the resources available. These are the kind of things. This is what I call, I mean, trying to reach, not trying to change, but trying to keep people on the survival strategy. The second is envisioning all options, all possible options, opening new doors and platforms. This is something that most people in the poor community, they will say, for us, what's possible is only this, and they will remain that. The discussion that we have with community, and now the new process with social work, is to say many things are open, many things are possible, but if and how we can work together, we can leverage different things. Then it's also linking and relating community within and outside. This is very important. For a long time, I mean, those who are segregated, those who are poor, they live by themselves. Those who are rich, they live by themselves. But in the African context, solidarity was something important. But that solidarity has been kind of forgotten a bit. Then what we try to do is to bring back that solidarity. And how to do that is to create a kind of connection between different composition of the society in relating to them. And, and this kind of piloting a new project or working on a new project, we describe, or we tried to link what we call the sponsors, people who are in a higher position, to link with people who are in a very difficult situation, not in terms of giving money or giving, resources, but in linking them, because social workers are supposed to work on social ties, but often working with poor community, we forget that social ties is the basic thing to work with, and we work on the economic side. The principle here is someone cannot integrate economically if he's not integrated socially. That's why we bring people from different positions to link with different communities that obviously normally they are not linked. That linking have to be worked. And we, based on that, we try to mobilize a large resource, a large support system. And finally, also to empower community in the leadership of the program. It's not social workers who decide what should be done. It's also bringing community how they could become themselves a leadership of their own destiny and their own program. Connecting all the social work, I mean, when we come to the information technology, is also connecting all social work entities using new technology of information and communication. For that, we have to reconceptualize, rework with engineers in Congo, with engineers in different parts, and what kind of technology we can use, how to connect different entities, how to build new, to conceptualize and design new softwares in relation to the need of information of exchange and exchanging, how to capitalize on information on countrywide, how to learn from the experience of other colleagues in networking. This was, I mean, the second element. And now maybe I could show you just a little video. When we start this program, a pilot program, we have had, I mean, a group of, 10 women. We said, before starting it on a large scale, let's do this in a very small scale. And we, have the chance that one social worker was trying to work with 10 women, and in a very remote area, we started to work with them. And that is what I'm going to show you in this two little video. The first video is the video that when we started 1 year ago, and the second video is the result after 1 year. And this is the video that I've been done in January, February, a year and 3 months after the first we start this project. Technician, can you help us to show the video?
Kombo na ngai Okulokei Joséphine. Nga na botami en 1961. Nga na fandaka awa na Inie. Na Inie, grâce na affaire sociale, moto apesaka biso makoki ya kobanda koteka na batable.
Des 10 femmes que nous avons identifiées et nous avions appuyées. Et après notre appui, elles se sont renforcées encore en organisation, en ristourne. Et au vu des ristournes, c'est là où nous les avions propulsées pour les travaux agricoles.
Ici, nous sommes à la ferme Ngatsu, dans le district d'Igné. Aujourd'hui, je suis venu déposer les femmes qui viennent pour travailler dans le garde des groupements. Nous les prenons tous les lundis et nous les ramenons à Igné. Et tous les jeudis, on les amène pour qu'après le travail, elles rentrent aussi. De là où nous venons, aller et retour, ça fait 24 km.
Na mosala tozo sala to ane likia biloko oyo biso toko sala e sola to teka to jwa ba moyen.
Ngai nalaki na makoki ya koteka na zando te. Natekaka kaka devant lopango ya ndeko. Natia table na ngai ya ba divers wana. Lere ya kalatola kosala bilanga. Yalaki ndenge mosusu. Me ya lelo yo tokomo yekola biloko nani tomona te. Lokola formation oyo tozosala oyo monsieur Ibrahim azolakisa biso nani toyeba biloko wana te. Tozosalaka ba chimie. Tosali chimie ya liboso oyo ya koboma ba insectes.
Nous remercions vraiment Madame la ministre. C'est même son créneau quoi. Elle veut vraiment que l'accompagnement des vulnérables soit une priorité pour les services sociaux.
Thank you. Just before the second video, these are the people that we have been started to work with, and what we did is basically to really discuss with them for over 3 months what they want to do and so on and so on, and how and so on. And then we mobilized an engineer that you have heard his name called Ibrahim. He is an agronomist, and he worked with them to teach them locally how to use insecticide, local insecticide, how to use different materials, how to work on agriculture. And then they started, using that process. And we also mobilized 10 people, ambassadors, UN people. These are different, engineers, director generals and so on. And we bring them to this woman, working with them and speaking to them, passing time with them, and give them importance that these people, taking care of them. Then all this is starting to move, because this women are saying, oh, all these people are interested on us. We exist. We become someone, and someone is looking after us. We are individuals. We are citizens. They start to have a very nice feeling of themselves and the environment. Even the minister you have seen, we have mobilized the minister in order that she go and talk to them. Individual, she just go to discuss with them only. You can imagine for these people having a minister coming and talking to them, passing time with them, have been very important. These are the entire processes, what mobilizing community, mobilizing other people, mobilizing schools. We mobilized the schools in in Brazzaville to go and work with this woman and so on. We mobilized a huge gap, a huge number of people from different backgrounds to be in solidarity with with this woman. And this is the second video now that you are seeing, that you are going to see, how this have made a change in their activities and their income. Second video, please.
liboso tosepeli mingi mpona lisungi oyo tobandaki na bilanga boye bilanga balobi ti ya na avantage te boye tokwei na marécharge. Donc tosepeli mingi mpona lisungi oyo mpona mosala na biso mpe ekende liboso oyo batikali nsima na biso mpe bango mpe bapambolama mpona à travers lisungi na biso oyo mpona à travers lisungi na biso oyo.
Tobandaki na mosala na biso ya bilanga. Lere tosilisi bilanga. Tomoni bilanga yali molai na kosimba mbongo. 18 mois. Yango wana toyi na maréchage. Lere toyi na maréchage awa basungi biso ebele. Tokomi na bakavaki na biso, ba motopompe, ba semence, makambo tout tokomi na yango lelo. Donc esengo mingi mpona biso ba mama yinye na ndenge vraiment biso tozwi lisungi oyo tokolala lisusu te ndenge totelemi boye totelemi libelela e tokokende mpe liboso mosala mpe komona na bato mpe bakosepela.
Lere tobandaki tola kokende na bataxi tola kolue mpe bataxi moto me lelo tozwi bakavaki tokokende liboso mosala mpe ekomonana na miso ya bato.
Vraiment tokoki kojonga lisusu nsima te mosala ekomi mikolo nyonso tosepeli.
Tolaki na pasi awa ya arrosage fo totombola baarrosage tokondo toka mai na lake kuna mpona to arrose biloko me boye vraiment tokomi na esengo parce tozomona su pasi te tofongoli ka barobine boye mai ebimi tokomi omona makambo tomona te. Vraiment esengo mingi mitema etoli na esengo makambo basaleli biso ana tomona yango te panda mbotama na biso. Tokomatisa production tokopesa mpe mboka na biso inye lokumu à travers biso inye fo etombwama na kati ya bamama na kati ya mosala ya sengo.
Thank you. And finally, just want to show for the audience the last picture. This is the same woman. When we started, you could see the visage or the face of this woman, how she was. And this is 1 year after. And the change is also physical, not only on dressing. Now people have their own dress, I mean, professional dress and so on, but also their physical change. What I'm trying to say is the change, real change in the life of the people have been possible through this project. This is the project now we're trying to launch for over 2,000 people in the coming months in September. Thank you.